This week on the Valor Flight Crew podcast, we welcome Chelsea Sibold from Carilion Life-Guard to discuss their HEAT program.
Getting a firsthand at talking about some of these NTSB reports and things like that, and seeing how, they're thinking through some of the risk factors and things that came together for those crashes to occur has been really eye-opening for me. And it really challenges my tendency towards complacency to be on the safety team. Like, it keeps me accountable. Way more so than just in my day-to-day. Because you're right, like, we all deserve to go home at the end of the day, and we all plan to, whether we're actively making that a thing or not. We plan to go home at the end of the day. But being on the safety team has really helped me to stay way more safety conscious at work and keep myself in check, and then also be willing to speak up to my team when I see things that I'm like, hey, I don't know if this is the best way for us to go about this or that kind of thing.
Welcome back to the Valor Flight Crew podcast, hosted by Echo and brought to you by Vertical Helicasts and Valor Plus. In this episode, we're joined by Chelsea Sibold from Carilion Life-Guard to talk about a critical piece of aviation safety that often happens long before a mission even launches: HEAT, or Helicopter Emergency Accident Training. Chelsea shares how realistic, hands-on training helps to prepare aviation crews and first responders for the moments we all hope never happen: aircraft emergencies on the ground. From aircraft shutdown and door operations to coordinated rescue and extrication, HEAT focuses on building the muscle memory and communication that matter when seconds count. We also dive into the power of interagency training, simple but effective ways to create realistic scenarios, and how strong partnerships between aviation programs, fire departments, and EMS crews can make the difference between chaos and coordination. Because in public safety aviation, safety isn't just about flying the mission. It's about preparing for the unexpected. So strap in, check your gauges, and join us as we lift into a conversation about training, teamwork, and building a stronger safety culture for the crews behind the mission. Thank you to our sponsors: Airbus, Precision Aviation Group, and Metro Aviation.
Welcome to the Valor Flight Crew podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts and Vertical Valor magazine. Produced in partnership with Echo, Every Coast Helicopter Operations, the Valor Flight Crew podcast promotes the personnel and life-saving equipment behind helicopter air ambulance services. Join hosts Mike Fideli and Blake Schreider for in-depth interviews and expert insights from air medical personnel, pilots, communication specialists, and maintenance crews who play critical roles in airborne emergency response.
Line 1 accepting. Copy, line 1, gotcha, accepting. You're going to be talking to Red Feather 1 on LCEMS.
Now, I love that this is really a multi-step or a multifactorial process for you guys, that you have the crew aspect of it, because it is so important to have that particular side of the training, but then there's also that community aspect of it as well. And I love that you guys are incorporating those, and it's not, while yes, it is separate, they are so integrated in that, like, if you don't do these things, it's not going to matter how quickly or how long, it takes for our fire departments to get to us. It's not going to matter if you don't do the things you need to do to get there in the first place. Right. So I love that you guys are doing all of that.
Well, in talking to the fire departments too, we think about how redundant our aircraft are. Have we talked through what they should be doing if we are all unresponsive, like nobody's moving, nobody's getting out of the aircraft, and it's still running? Because, like, if the skids have spread, those rotors on an EC-135 are pretty close to the ground, like 6-7 feet off the ground. And if we're on a slope too, then if they're not approaching from the right place, then that ends very badly for them, So are there ways for them to shut down our aircraft without ever getting close to it? Yes, there are. They can flood it, and so I've been very clear in these classes that I'm like, if you see us moving, you don't have to start flooding the engine necessarily. Like, we're going to get it shut down, because the very first thing any of us do our priority, we know, is to shut down that aircraft, because we know help will come if that aircraft is quiet, right? So if we are moving, then that's probably not something you need to do. But if we have, slammed into the ground and nobody appears to be moving, and you feel like you need to intervene, you should not be approaching that running aircraft still, because you do not know all the danger zones. You do not know the places that you shouldn't be touching. And once a year is still not enough training for us to tell you how to be safe around a crashed aircraft, because most of us are also going to struggle in that scenario. So, like, flood it, but also making sure they understand that when a system is redundant for a reason, you're not gonna just squirt it a little bit with water and it's gonna shut down.
Right.
Like the EC-135 has a sand filter. It's going to take a lot of water. And if you only have one fire truck there, you're probably going to be calling for more water, right? And then, having the fire training on paper has been helpful to think through, like, technically with a jet fuel fire, we want Class B foam, right? Well, most of our rural departments are not carrying Class B foam. The solution to pollution is still going to be dilution, but they have to understand that that jet fuel is going to flow. So that fire initially is going to be movable. And so they need to be thinking about where they're sending it, right? If we're at the top of a hill and there's a bunch of structures at the bottom, then they probably need to be protecting those structures as well, if they're going to be sending jet fuel that's on fire down the hill. Eventually, water is still going to be enough to put it out. But once again, they're probably going to need to be calling for lots of water to make sure that we're ready for that. And then things that they haven't considered, Miranda was able to sit down with Derek Sawyer. He was the chief at the time of the Drexel Hill helicopter crash where they landed in the churchyard there on the steps. And we have the Time magazine level photograph of them getting out of the side of that aircraft with a baby while jet fuel is just pouring out. Like that, I think, is one of the most powerful photographs that I've seen in a post-crash environment like that. And he said, I had no idea, not only, just the complexity involved with an aircraft crash, but how long this was going to be a scene. Because we know after an aircraft crash, who's getting called in? Everybody, right? The FAA is coming, the NTSB is coming, our aviation people are coming. Like there are multiple people coming to this scene, and it's going to stay the way it looks for as long as they can maintain it if it's not bothering major infrastructure, right? Because they're going to try to do some reconstruction. So he was just so floored by how long of a scene this was and how the scene needed security and, all these things to be considered, like finding debris fields and then, giving security at where they find debris, because you don't just pick it up and throw it on your fire truck and take it back with you, like the NTSB wants to see it where it landed, kind of thing. So just warning them that if this occurs in our community, that this is going to be like a form of an MCI, right? Because it's going to require a lot of resources for a committed amount of time to be able to manage. And so in these rural communities, that's going to be a lot harder, where we don't have as many resources. And a lot of these people are volunteers, so we're going to have to set up shifts for people who are going to be on site at all times, providing whatever's necessary. So just that kind of thing that we don't think about. And then the hazmat responses too, right? You're probably going to have a regional hazmat team coming in because jet fuel alone is, not something you want flowing into your closest river. So, fuel cleanup and things like that too are going to take time and involve major resources.
Like the more that we talk about this, I just am replaying over and over in my head all the times that we've checked the box. We've talked about it. We've checked the box, and I said, "Great, I'm aware."
I'm ready.
You said just bringing a jacket with you again. What are those?
You're in Florida, but it could still be
summertime, 60. Right? And even when it rains, even when it rains overnight, and you talked about hills, mountains, stuff, totally different terrain out here, but it still highlights the importance of, I could definitely bring a jacket at night. We fly across our state right over the Everglades frequently, and it happens.
That's a swamp.
Seems to be, but it seems to be at night, always.
And then you might have to fight an alligator.
That I can handle. I think pythons
are you
are
sure about that?
That seems like a weird box to check, Blaze.
That's not a big deal. They're just little swamp puppies, I guess. I can distract them by throwing something. It's those pythons and the rattlesnakes.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan.
But how do you start a fire in a swamp?
Exactly. Right. And then, we've always, you said that whole joke of someone's going to find me.
Yeah.
That's true. They will find you, but how do they get to you? Right.
Yes.
And then how do you survive and just maintain that your mental integrity for going through what you just went through, trying to find mental clarity after an incident and trying to take care of your coworkers all at the same time. And we're talking this crash in something remote, right? But then when you bring it forward to and you incorporate it into the LZ training, and for all our fire friends out there, everybody, your first instinct is, I'm going to go there and help them. You see that go down. Your first thing is I'm running towards that. And Mike, we had this podcast before with Danica Mainridge about going right into that. Right.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
And that's just our intent as servants, as first responders. That's our first intent. But like you said, it's so important. Not only do we want to try to give ourselves the best shot of survival, but we also don't want anyone else to get hurt if there's something that's going to be preventable. So it's so important to highlight all of these little things that it may seem minuscule. Just you talking about just sending the water and it pushes the jet fuel that's on fire down the hill to structures, like just the Murphy's law of things of like, well, we were able to put that out, but then we started a large brush fire that extended into a structure, like just the most final destination stuff that you can think about, unfortunately, should all be part of that realm of a possibility. And it warrants at least, just like you said, the what if. And just kind of bringing that home, and it just envelops that other thought process for people to think about. Man, that was a really good point that you brought up, because we don't have that foam or we don't have enough water. How are we going to get a tanker up this mountain if we have 500, 700 gallons on this engine, and that's all we got? You're going to go through that really quick.
I think it really just brings the point home of what we talked about a little bit before. Like, Blake, are you going to watch a PowerPoint or a video on how to do an intubation and just expect you're good to go?
No,
I hope not.
Yeah, like
not at all.
Like, you have to practice this stuff.
You have to do it.
Just because you carry flint with you doesn't mean you can start a fire, right?
Yeah,
like,
no,
you have to be able to practice a lot of those things.
That's not going to work well.
And so that's everything included in this, in this heat training, because it's so important that you don't just know what the skill is, that you can actually perform that skill.
And it does tie into your survival training for sure. Like, do you know what's in your survival kit, your personal kit? Do you know how to use it? Like, we carry the SOL kits. I think a lot of people carry those, and they're great. But the fire starting equipment in there is a couple of wicks that you pull apart, and then like a sparker. And it does work. But if you've never used it before, it's pretty frustrating to try to figure out. And if you were hurt and cold and tired, it's probably not the best time for that to be the first time you're trying to do it. And something, that I do for my survival is everything's individual. You build your own shelter, you build your own fire, and you talk about where you're putting those two things together. And something I tell them to think through is, what if you were the sole survivor and you're badly injured, like you have a broken back or something, so you can't just get up and walk and do things.
Right.
Or you're like, you can't move well and you're covered in jet fuel, so you can't start a fire. What are other ways you can keep yourself warm? Where our kits come with a Mylar blanket. That's at least, if you could get that out, that is still a form of shelter. And I let them decide how involved their shelter needs to be. Sometimes, we've got people building like log cabins out here in the woods, and there's somebody I would like to crash with, because it seems like we're going to have a pretty good shelter. And they have like a bonfire.
He's got Starlink set up. He's
I'm like, what? Did you have a tent in your pocket? Like, what on earth? Like, this is great. But then some people realize that that's not their strong suit, and maybe they sit there huddled on some pine needles in a Mylar blanket, and that is technically shelter as well, right? So it all depends on, like you were saying too, though, like your location is going to really dictate what survival skills you need. If you land in the middle of a swamp, that's really different than landing on the side of a mountain or landing in the middle of a field. Even say you land in the middle of a field, but you can't like get anywhere for firewood, like that's also like maybe you're just wrapped up in a blanket. Hopefully, if you're in a field, you're in a hoistable area, right?
Right.
They can hopefully hoist you. I took the shallow water egress class in Austin too. And that was something those instructors really hammered home. They were like, are you ready to tread water for 30 minutes? And I was like, 30 minutes? Like, why? Like if I'm in the middle of like a city.
But with your flight suit on.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and I felt like I was on The Guardian, like where they're like all the Coast Guard swimmers in the beginning of that movie, they're like, make them swim for hours.
Yeah.
It was nowhere near that intense, but they made us swim for 30 minutes. And for 10 of those minutes, we couldn't use our arms. And for 10 minutes, we couldn't use our legs. And they're like, well, if your leg's broken, you're certainly not going to be treading water with it, or if your arm's broken or your shoulder's dislocated, you're not going to be treading water with it. So can you tread water for 30 minutes? Because even if you are in a metropolitan area it's probably going to take 30 minutes before they activate everybody and everybody gets to you. And that's in like a busy place, not in a rural place. And we fly over enough water that it could happen, to us too. But I was like, okay, if 30 minutes is the minimum, then, like I said, in West Virginia, 24 hours could be a maximum that you're looking at depending on weather conditions. And if it's 17 degrees, you best be able to build a fire, because I noticed when we did groups, it's like any group project. You have one person who's really good at things. Like one person's really good at building shelter. One person's really good at building fire. And the other person's just kind of like, I'll pick up all the firewood, and hopefully you crash together and you all are capable of moving around and doing those things. Right. But really, like you said, unless you have practiced, can you get a fire going? And do you know what it should be? Like also our kits have a signal mirror in them. Never in my life before I was a base safety officer did I know how to use a signal mirror. Right. So I was like, well, let me look into this, because, you can signal commercial aircraft at 30,000 feet with a signal mirror. So we try not to practice that on my farm, because I don't want the FBI to show up and be like, ma'am, we had a commercial aircraft see an SOS from this location, but at least do you know how to use a signal mirror? That was not in my repertoire as a nurse or a paramedic prior to coming to flight. Now, a lot of our pilots with their military training, of course, probably have some familiarity with these things, but you don't know who's going to be in a state to be helpful. And I don't want to be the one trying to save everybody and fail at that either. Right. If I'm the one who's least injured, I want to be able to do the most that I can for my crew. And have you practiced getting a patient out? Right. Because trying to get them off of a stretcher is, especially in an EC-135, our clamshell doors are not going to open after a crash. So how are you getting your patient out quickly? Right. And maybe they're not going to be salvageable. If they're on oxygen and intubated, the likelihood is they probably, unfortunately, are not going to make it through that, because we're not going to have all of that for them immediately available in that post-crash environment. But maybe it is somebody who's more stable who could survive. And so are we prepared, to drag our patient out of our aircraft as well?
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140 plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
And, I think back, and obviously most of my experiences is on the crew level and not necessarily with the fire departments or EMS partners that we have out there in terms of doing the training. But I think back to when I started in the industry, and I've worked for a couple different agencies, and there were some where we would use the fog machine, and we would have to actually jettison the door and those kind of things it was all, obviously staged, but it was to be able to get a little bit of that muscle memory. And then I think how that training has evolved over the years. And I think back to probably the last, I don't know, maybe 10 people, 12 people I've oriented. I don't think that hands-on training has been a portion for a majority of those people, because I think we've transitioned away from this. No, these are the things, these are the skills that we need to be aware of. And I think that we come into this job and we don't like to, like we said before, we don't like to think about that. This isn't, not that it's not going to happen to me. We know this is a dangerous career, but we don't do the steps necessary coming into this job to prepare ourselves to take care of us in the event of something unfortunate happening. And it's crazy to me that we don't that's the norm, is not doing all of this hands-on in the field, practicing all of this stuff, that the norm is talking about it.
Yeah.
And that's crazy.
Even though we know, like you said, we're not going to watch a video of an intubation or watch a video of a finger thoracostomy and be like, you good? All right, go and prosper. Right. Good luck. We're crike. Heaven forbid you have to crike somebody and you've only ever watched a video of it. Can you imagine?
Saw this once.
Well, yeah. What we do for a living is, we practice what we preach. We are constantly hands-on. We are constantly trying to make sure we're at the top of our game with everything, except for we seem to have, kind of pushed our own safety off. And I don't think it's purposeful. I think it is just like it's in the back closet and we don't want to worry about it kind of thing. And so we just kind of leave it there. And then all of a sudden something happens. There's a new crash happens and you're like, we should really talk about this. And then a week later, everybody forgets again. And that's not, unless it's your program, right? Some of these programs that have had recent crashes, I know have not forgotten what happened, but still, also, I think the benefit for me coming from EMS, I was thinking back, I did the LZ safety and services when I was a paramedic for landing the helicopter. And then when I got in the helicopter and was thinking about extrication and things like that, I was like, oof, it would really stink if they cut through the wall right here, because this is where all the fuel lines and oxygen lines are.
Yeah.
That's going to be a bad day. Somebody should probably tell them about that.
Right.
Or, look at these cool exit windows that they could, also access from the outside. But if we've never told them about them, are they looking for those as an entry point into the aircraft? Because we're also sitting right behind those doors. So if they're going to use a Sawzall on that door, where is my leg in relation to the Sawzall, right? Like, obviously, I'd rather have my leg get cut with a Sawzall and get out of the aircraft. But, like if there's a different way in, shouldn't I be showing them that? And have they seen a 5-point or 4-point harness seatbelt in a while? And do they understand how my helmet's plugged in? And do they understand how to take my helmet off? We do football helmet. We do motorcycle helmet removal. Aviation helmets are similar, but not the same. Right. So once again, when you're highly stressed, is that the first time you should be removing a helmet? And what about the night vision goggles? I'm probably going to have a neck injury. So hopefully you are like maintaining my C-spine. Because of the weight of that on my head, that's totally different than a motorcycle or a football helmet being on my head as far as injury pattern. And then like I wear Nomex, right? And so does the fire department, but theirs is a whole lot different than mine. It's triple layer, mine's single layer. Mine is made for one flash fire and then it needs to come off. Because if it does not get off of me quickly, that heat's going to start to transfer to me. That Nomex has very little ability. It's like a one-hit wonder, right? It's made for that one flash fire and that's it. But if they're not immediately cutting off of me, then it's not, it's lost its function and that heat is going to transfer to my body. So encouraging them to get us trauma naked immediately, which is hard if they're our friends, right? They don't want to be inconsiderate of us. And I don't want them to be like, well, we know Chelsea. We don't want to cut her flight suit off because she's going to be mad at us when she wakes up if she's naked. No, the whole point is this Nomex needs to come off my body as soon as possible for my safety if I was in a flash fire in that aircraft, so you need to get it off as fast as possible so that heat doesn't transfer. So we have slides about single layer Nomex and how that works. We have slides about helmet removal. We have slides about unplugging from our Carter box. Could they cut that line? Absolutely. But sometimes is it going to be faster to unplug it and just pull us out of our seatbelt than cutting everything? Yes. And it's not as fun. But so showing them how all those things work so that because that might be the easiest, fastest way to get us out, not cutting things, and then showing them, like the doors of an aircraft are the safe spots to cut. Like there is nothing in that door. It's the thinnest part and there's nothing important in there. There's no electrical lines. There's no oxygen. There's no fuel lines. Getting them to understand how fuel bladders work in an aircraft, right? Because, most of the aircraft now have like the fuel bladders underneath instead of tanks so that they're not going to like rupture and spark and explode. But those bladders are still going to rupture and fuel is going to pour out everywhere. It's just, in such a way that hopefully there's not an explosion or a spark. And then what equipment should they be using? Like if they're using a circular saw that's going to throw a ton of sparks, that might not be ideal around the jet fuel. Yeah. Like, so maybe your hydraulic tools that aren't creating a ton of sparks would be ideal, but letting them know too, because most of the time they look at that aircraft and think that it's a tank, right? And it is in some ways, but then when they see how thin our doors are, they're like, oh, like anything would cut this. I'm like, right. And then when they see like our front doors, like the little, the strut, like the little, like the hydraulic. I'm like, do you see this? Like you could cut this and that door will open all the way. You don't even have to cut the, like that. If you cut through that thing, that door is going to flop all the way to the front of the aircraft. You're going to have full access. And then things as simple as pulling center of mass out first. They want to go for our legs a lot. And I'm like, listen, I don't think that I want my head to be the thing that slams down out of the aircraft onto the skids, right? So, but it's like a natural inclination for whatever reason. And our people do it too to each other. I'm like, no, center of mass comes at the biggest, heaviest part of us comes out first because we're usually still coming out from above you. Even if the skids are spread, you're kind of like pulling down.
You have your helmet on, so it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, well, and it's funny because people always ask, they're like, have you ever had an aircraft go out of service? Because we're 5 years into doing heat training. And no, we have not. But we have had some
You
people
bet.
dropped.
Knock on some wood.
Yeah, knock on wood for sure for the aircraft not going out of service, but we have had some people dropped. One of my coworkers, Shane, has been dropped more than once. So that
Does it explain something for him?
He thinks I'm paying people, I'm pretty sure at this point. I'm not.
Sorry, Shane.
But so that's part of the, safety officer job on that side of the aircraft is if you feel like they're pulling somebody out in such a way that's unsafe to that crew member, it's like, okay, everybody stop. We're going to have a quick talk about this and then we're going to let you go back into your scenario. But let's take our time because we don't need to, obviously if anything's on fire and this is real, then get me out how you need to get me out and we'll deal with it later. But for training, we do have to have a little bit of, thought process behind what we're doing. The biggest thing that I've seen as a possible damage point is when they're in full gear, that air tank, when they climb up on the skid to get people out, is banging around. Most of the time I have both hands on an air tank and I'm making sure they're not slamming it into the fiberglass of the aircraft, because that's usually going to be what would cause some sort of damage. Sure. And we operate the doors during the fog and extrication portion because they're excited and I don't want a door to get ripped off the hinges because those EC-135 doors can come off, but then as soon as the drill, right, don't come up in your hands. Yeah. So after the drill though, we have them come up and we're like, okay, grab all the doors, open all the doors, articulate them some and get a good feeling for the weight of the door and how it opens, how it shuts, all of that. Same thing with the belts and all the things. So that way, if they didn't feel like they got a good hands on while they were geared up. And something we've run into, sometimes you'll have an EMS only department that wants to do it. And we talk about it. We let them play and extricate us and everything. But it's one of those discussions where it's once again, if you're an ambulance on scene, there's no fire truck, you should not be approaching a crashed aircraft not in full gear because that is a dangerous thing that could explode or, catch on fire at any time. Like we talked about, that's hard, right? Because that's who most people are. Right. Even your EMS only people are, helpers and they're going to want to help. And we've had people who want to bring the stretcher up to the aircraft. So we're trying to remind them that's a hot zone. It's just like a hazmat or anything else. Mm-hmm. The only people in that hot zone should be in full SCBA, full gear, ready for anything that occurs, a flash fire, anything. And then, EMS could stage in a warm zone with the stretcher ready, to grab them. But we shouldn't be pulling people out of an aircraft onto a stretcher overall, because even if it's fully shut down and all the things, there's still going to be a massive fuel leak going on. And we don't need to have people in a hot zone that are not appropriately protected.
I really wish the more that we talk and think about this, I'm like, man, we as HEMS providers and as companies and everything, we spend so much money on pens and pizza, all the time. And not that it doesn't have a place. I love pizza. Yep. I never have a pen. So, but at the same time, this is something that if we don't honestly take seriously and put that out there for our other agencies, because I mean, with all due respect, they're the people that are calling us, right? And God forbid in any of these incidents, that if this happens, they're going to be the ones that are going to be right there. And like you said, it's so important to make sure that they at least have an idea of what to expect. Like we always say, expect the unexpected, but okay, what does that look like? know, and what does that mean? And so our relationships with our local partners are so important that it is our foundation. So I think this training that you guys have put together is huge. And I think you've proven that it doesn't take a whole lot of money.
Nope.
It just takes a heck of a lot of planning and a heck of a lot of effort on everybody's part to really push this type of training forward. But it's going to benefit everybody, especially us and especially the people that are coming to help. And I don't know. I feel like when we say that, hey guys, we want to come out and do this type of LZ class with a, rescue part to it. I think initially, some people might be like, well, okay, we've done these before. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm thinking in my mind, if we were to be like, hey, we want to do this, they'd be like, what? But if, you guys have laid this groundwork to show exactly what this would take, were your local partners? I know you said they had kind of reached out and said, hey, we don't really have this training, but as that kind of spread and grew to other departments, what was their reception to that part of the training? And because I can only imagine if I came in on the fire side and like, all right, guys, we have the helicopter LZ class today. We're going to need you in your gear. And you're like, dude, it's like 10 o'clock. It's going to be hot as heck. I've got lunch, at noon. Like,
Yeah.
How were people really receptive to that as they went through and be like, hey, you know what, this was really worth it. I understand the necessity of having to get in my full gear and trying to think of these unimaginable scenarios. But when you kind of bring up those points, it's like, that's not really a far stretch from reality. Was there a lot of good feedback for that necessity of it?
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, save lives, and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
Yeah, actually, we were trying to do a lot of post-class surveys when it was new because that's how you learn, right? And you figure out maybe pieces that you've missed. And so we did update our PowerPoint a few times with suggestions from people. Or as I thought of things, I was like, hey, firefighters are obsessed with knowing where the battery is on things, right? Because
Yes,
on any car,
absolutely.
they're going to, because if you don't disconnect that battery, the airbags are going to go off, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. I'm married to a firefighter. I understand. And so one day when the mechanic was there, I was like, hey, can you just open the battery compartment for me so I can take a picture? And he's like, yeah. And then I was like, can you show me how to unhook it? And I'll just, take a picture and video of that. And he's like, yeah, saying once again, he's like, why do you need to know this? I was like, I promise it's not for me. And I explained, and he was like, oh yeah, no problem. And I asked him too, I was like, what other substances are on the aircraft that we should be concerned with hazmat wise? He was like, the same things on a car, just more like transmission fluid, oil, gas, jet fuel, all the things, But yeah, overall, our class surveys as they came back were mainly either little pieces of things that they thought would be important to include, or in the beginning there, it was like, hey, videos and a PowerPoint would be super helpful. And that was the main response we got. But overall, actually, it's been really positive, and it's still one of our most requested trainings 5 years in because it's interactive. That first year, or maybe it was the second year, I can't remember which fiscal year we looked at, it was we completed 40 plus of those, but we had received requests for more than that, It is hard.
40.
Yeah, it is hard operationally, right? Because an LZ safety class takes an hour. This we usually plan for 3. In the aircraft, we try to have there for 1.5 to 2 of those hours. And so that's hard because then you're talking to somebody's leadership and they're like, we have calls to answer, because obviously our service to the community matters significantly in the consideration of doing PRs and training. And then working with local area dispatch is super important too, because especially since we do use a fog machine, if anybody calls 911, you want your dispatchers for local fire and EMS to know.
That thought never even crossed my mind.
Yeah.
Mine either.
We have a lot of looky-loos, the helicopter's on fire. Somebody's going to call 911. And our director always pushes it out to our Carilion media team too. So same thing, if they hear wind of one of our helicopters on fire on that day, we can basically say that's definitely for training. Something else we've run into, and this is going to be program dependent, and we ran into it with our workshop last year, was that program, their mechanics felt strongly about not using a fog machine. They were worried about that moisture with the avionics, and they're the experts on that, not I.
Sure.
I am not an aircraft mechanic. Our aircraft mechanic, it's not something that they have worried about. They've all approved us to use fog machines, but we're about to get new helicopters, and that may change with new helicopters, and avionics being different and more sensitive. So people are like, well, what if you can't use a fog machine? Well, I don't think that that's relevant. Is the fog machine a way to make it fun? Yes. I think the fog machine creates urgency and gives them a little bit of that adrenaline rush, because we let it fog up with people inside. And then when you open those doors, it is impressive to see fog pour out of the aircraft and, practice you would see in real life kind of thing. But at the end of the day, if that's the only thing keeping you from doing this kind of training is that you can't have a fog machine, then who cares? Don't use the fog machine. We should still be pulling people out of aircraft, at the end of the day. So Like, yes, I think, if your mechanics approve a fog machine, it's a great way to add to your training. And for those of us inside, if you're trying to do some drills with like decreased visibility in your aircraft, it's a great way to do that. And it depends on the person. If you have a provider that works for you that has, like severe asthma or things like that, sometimes that glycerin is a little bit more annoying to them than it would be to the rest of us. So that's a consideration always. But yeah, if you can't have a fog machine, please still do heat training. Just do it
Right.
without a fog machine, because it makes it a little harder because you have to have a source of power then at your LZ,
Yeah.
right? So most of the time we'll have a fire department just pull a generator or something off their truck and we use that. And for us in Virginia, it's climate specific. So we usually do this spring through fall in Virginia because, because you have to think about crew fatigue and things like that too. So if they're out in 17-degree weather or 110-degree weather, that's more fatiguing for them, especially being locked in an aircraft that's not on with fog in it when it's 110 degrees outside for 2 hours, for iterations. So we've also kind of limited, usually we will not extricate them more than 3 times, because that also starts to get annoying and you get pulled on and all the things. And also when I teach this class, I always wear my flight suit to it. So that way I can sub in. I'll bring my helmet and flight suit. And like, since they're on duty, I'm like, they can extricate me if you'll be safety officer, because I get to
Poor
go home.
Shane getting dropped like 3 times.
Yeah, I always make Shane
getting pulled
and
out. Yeah.
we've actually messed with them before too, because like Shane is a normal sized male guy, who's like 6 feet tall, and then we have like a couple flight nurses that maybe weigh 90 pounds, and so you'll have all the firefighters fighting. They're like, we're going to be on that side of the aircraft where the little female flight nurse is, and so once we fog it up, once we fog it up, we've had them swap before, because I'm like, you have no idea when you come rescue me, you don't get to choose who you rescue. Like,
right?
So so we've had them swap before. So that's probably why poor Shane gets dropped, because they've chosen the side that they thought they were getting the 90-pound flight nurse, and they didn't. But it's a fun way to, and we've had people, on some of our career departments that are, get to do it more often or things like that. We've swapped it up. We've had somebody be up front. We do not extricate the pilot, because he's not a Carilion employee, and 2, he or she, we only have he's, but he or she is very important, obviously, for being able to keep that aircraft in service. Little less replaceable, right?
They're a little fragile. They're a little fragile. So
they're more, we're more replaceable because usually we have more crew available if something were to happen to fill in, So they serve as that overall safety officer and can kind of keep an eye on the aircraft as a whole. But if you have a really great group or they've done this class multiple times, then we'll have somebody sit up front on the non-pilot side of the aircraft to extricate. Or we try to schedule ride-alongs on these days. So then there's 3 people extra, because the ride-alongs love it. Like whether it's a EM resident or something, like they're like, heck yeah, I'll get pulled out of the aircraft. That sounds like fun. Or we've had people lay on the stretcher and then they have to figure out, okay, if there were a patient on the stretcher, how would I drag the patient out? Because the back doors can't open. So there are ways to, make it challenging for the ones who have done it before, and kind of keep it relevant for them still year to year. But yeah, it's been very positive. I have, heard a little bit of whining on the days that it's very hot or very cold. And that's, true of human nature in general. And like we said, putting on your if you've not put on full SCBA when it's 100 degrees outside, it does, stink. So I understand. But overall, like usually we have a lot of great buy-in, and yes, Blake, by the end of it, they're like, yes, this was valuable. Even though I sweated a lot, like, I learned some things and I feel way more capable of responding to this appropriately than I did when we started. So
I love that you guys do all of that within your iterations and really spend a lot of time with the hands-on portion of it. I also want to just throw a huge kudos out to the leadership team for Carilion and
absolutely,
for your pilots and also to the fire departments, because this is a huge commitment, and to really be so safety forward that you understand the necessity and the importance of training like this and being committed to making that happen. I kudos to your entire leadership team and all of you guys that have put so much work into doing all of this, because I think it is something that is so important out there. And like I said, I am not discounting any of the LZ classes that are out there. I think that they are absolutely wonderful classes. I just love that this is taking it to the next level, and this is really bringing in that hands-on portion of it and that interaction and the ability to ask questions and practice iterations for all of these things. At the end of the day, it is just making us safer and stronger as a team. And I absolutely love that and applaud all of you guys for doing that.
Yeah, I also have to give MedTrans a shout out. They're our aviation vendor and our regional safety guy, Keith Treadway. All of them have been so supportive of this. Obviously everybody approaches a new class with, rightfully like cautious, especially where we're going to potentially be putting the aircraft in a situation where it could be damaged. But, trying to prove to them that obviously that is our number one goal, to keep the aircraft and the crew safe during this kind of training. And then, of course, the fire guys and EMS providers that we have coming are also in the same line with that. And we have like safety words. We also, if I put my hand on them at any time, they know to just stop. They stop moving. That's until we tell them what's wrong, like whether it's their air tank hitting something or, we feel like they're removing the crew in an unsafe way. Things can still happen, right? People still get dropped sometimes and things like that. But overall, like our aviation leadership and yes, our Carilion leadership, we're very quickly on board with this. And we're like, yeah, like this seems really valuable. And we're lucky to have people who are willing to listen to our crazy ideas and say, yeah, like let's flesh this out a little bit and see what it looks like, and maybe do some testing with it. But then, once it started to go well, something else we do is if you've never taught one of these classes, you always teach it with somebody who knows how to teach it, so you attend one where two other people are there or one person who's taught it before. So that kind of, handing it down appropriately, making sure they're looking at all the things they need to be looking at and that kind of thing. Once again, just to try to keep our aircraft and our crew safe, to make sure that we're still doing what we need to do for our community as soon as we're done. But I do think it has strengthened our relationships with our departments because it is more FaceTime with them. They seem to have a lot of fun with it. We do too, usually, as long as temperatures are forgiving, I actually, after Echo Austin, some of the guys that attended our lecture came down from New Jersey because they wanted to see one of our heat classes in person. So that they could take it back. And it was November, which is usually mild here. And it was like 19 degrees. And I was like, you guys brought your temperatures with you, so they were fine with it because they're used to it. And I was like, guys, this is not how Virginia is. I'm so sorry, but that's been really cool too. Since we presented in 2022, we presented at Echo 2022, 2023, 2025, and then we're presenting it this year. And last year was the first year we kind of added that crew portion for real. After the San Diego one was kind of we're going to do this. And this year it's kind of developing further, but we've gotten emails from all over the country because this is very easily reproducible. And nobody should have to reinvent the wheel, and safety is not proprietary. And so we've been able to share, what we've created with them. And there are similar programs popping up all over the country now. And that's exactly, the vision that Miranda and I had when this all started, was that hopefully this could be something that we can get out there and help people to do. Because sometimes it's just a matter of, we want to do it, but how, right? And sometimes you don't have time to reinvent the wheel. So if somebody's already done it and can share it with you and you can give it to your leadership, we've had some, online meetings with other programs too, and some of their leaders that were maybe a little unsure, and talked with them through some of the operational sides of things of how we do things. And that's something that we offer at every one of our classes. I'm like, I'll share anything I can. I'll help in any planning phase that you need assistance with. I'll do whatever I can to be supportive of you establishing a program. But yeah, it seems to finally be getting out there, which is super exciting. And that was, kind of our whole hope when this all started.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I say the same thing about mental health and peer support and all of that. Like, it's not proprietary. I don't care where you get help as long as you get help. And I love that the same mantra is there with safety. And I think that's, again, where, Echo's safety team was really kind of, it took off and was branded from the get-go, because we need to do this across the entire industry. And I love that you guys are leaders in this. I love that you guys are so safety forward and so invested in not just your own safety, but the safety of all of your departments and communities around you, and the safety of every single air crew across the country. It's absolutely phenomenal work, and can't thank you, Chelsea, the Carilion team, the MedTrans team. Like, thank you for what you guys are doing to make this industry so much safer.
Yeah, we're one team at the end of the day. Like, we might all wear different color suits and fly in different color helicopters. And that's something I love about Echo, is getting to meet people from all over the country that are just as passionate about this job and what we get to do, because we get to do something that's really cool for a living, and I think we all feel that way about it. And that's why it's fun to come together. But we're one team at the end of the day. And we're really blessed that I work with amazing people that all feel like that. I love seeing other crews from other places when we're on the rooftop, talking and hanging out. And, we're really lucky to be supported and feeling that way. And like I said, we're just lucky overall to work for a very safety conscious program, and anything we can do to add to that and improve it. We also, I think, we're biased, but we have some of the best pilots. We're just super lucky that they're also so supportive to our goals. One of our pilots was one of the ones that helped name this. I can't claim the name for this course. It was him and one of my coworkers at my base that came up with it one day, because we were like, we got to come up with a cool name, and we had not. Yeah. And so, but they've also always been super supportive when we have these crazy training ideas, like incapacitated pilot, like, what are we going to do if this happens to y'all? And they're like, well, actually, there are some things you could do,
Right.
They're just open to that. And we're so grateful to have their support and just, work with amazing people that have cool ideas and are willing to speak up about them. Because sometimes, you might be afraid to speak up too. And luckily at our program, I don't think that we have a lot of people that aren't willing to speak up. And that's pretty cool.
What would you say would be one or two things then that you could throw out there for us that anybody that we should know about this prep or training? What are one of the one or two things that we could just kind of take away, or that has been super impactful for everybody as you've gone through this training and it's kind of been built? What do you think are one or two top highlights or things that you could take away from this training and bring back to your base?
It's so easy overall, to do this. Like, I think the biggest thing that I was always able to sell it with is it's not expensive. It's not time consuming to create. Like, it took Miranda and I a few days of like filming videos, taking pictures, all the things, so that I could then put all that together into like a great safety briefing, and having our people be willing to star in those videos, looking at a coworker.
I'm sure they love that.
That's probably the hardest.
No,
that's probably
like,
the hardest part.
Yeah. I was like, hey, I just need you to go open the door on the aircraft for me. And he's like,
yeah.
Like,
why?
Why?
I'm like, I'm going to video you doing it. And they're like,
you see me do this every day.
I know. Like, why is this special, Chelsea? Like, I am known for weird requests, but I did get some looks, And so, but, it didn't take long, I think, for buy-in from our people to see the value. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that it didn't cost much. It didn't take a lot of time. And then just the relationships that we have like created and supported with our first responders being able to do it, and with each other, because talking through crash scenarios with your people is different too, right? Because like we talked about, we all kind of sweep it into a closet. But when you're like looking at an NTSB report together and talking about it, and talking about, what if this happened to us? Like, what would this look like if we were on the side of the mountain in Pocahontas County, West Virginia? Like, what is our plan? We always joke with our pilots, we're like, we're going to eat you first,
Absolutely.
But, at the end of the day,
FBC
like,
question.
Right.
That was one of the answer choices.
Right. Like, what is our plan? What does this look like? Because we all talk about the Swiss cheese model. Things happen, right? Yeah. Things can align even in the best agencies with great safety cultures that are doing everything right. Bad things can still happen, or, mechanical failures can occur. It's not always human error. We know that human error is a number one cause, but that doesn't mean there are not other things that occur. Our aircraft are safe, but they're not perfect. They're not infallible. So for us, just like knowing that we're increasing the chances for us to go home at the end of our shift by pouring into this training, whether it's for our first responders or for ourselves, either way, we're increasing our chances of going home at the end of the shift. And I think that's the most valuable takeaway, is just remember, if you're going to what if everything for your patient, you need to be what ifing everything for yourself, whether that's your survival training, whether that's your incapacitated pilot training, if you guys are doing that, whether that's, it depends on your aviation vendor as to whether they are supportive of it. Like, does your pilot want you reading an EP, like a checklist to him in the case of an emergency, because his hands and feet are all busy, flying the aircraft. And we all know how to read. So that kind of thing. Yeah, right. Now, can you navigate that EP book, right? Because I'm not a pilot. Hopefully he's going to tell me exactly what page if that became necessary. But, have you talked through some of these things with your pilot and your crew? Like what would this actually look like? If like we have a high engine oil temp right now, we lose an engine, or what if we have something that's a land as soon as possible? I was talking to one of our pilots the other night. He was like, when I'm flying up front and you guys are in the back with a patient, a lot of the time I'm looking around and I'm like, well, if I had to auto rotate, there's a good field right there I could land in. Are we doing that when we're sitting up front, or are we just jabbering about what we're going to eat for lunch and, how that patient did? And, that's a pretty sunset. Or am I like, if he said right now, I need somewhere to land, could I easily identify a spot for him and call it out? Are you good at your clock? Can you say it's 10 o'clock low, it's about 2 miles? Like, are you good at those things? One of my pilots, when I was new, he was like, just point at it, Chelsea. Cause I was like, it's that, cause we've all been there where you're like, which part of the clock are we at here? And so he's like,
Chelsea,
just point at it. Yes, sir. I can point at it. I've gotten way better in 5 years, but something we did, and this is just small things. For me, I asked for this because I had seen a different program do it. It was not our idea. We put decals in the back on the doors for 3 and 9, because when I'm facing backwards, it's real easy for me to get confused at 2 a.m. as to which side of the aircraft. Am I on the right side? Am I on the left? Is it 3 o'clock or is it 9 o'clock where I'm at? And so that's helpful for me. Some of our people were like, that's stupid. I don't need that. I'm like, that's great. I think that's great that you don't need that, but I do. Because at 2 a.m., I want to be clear and concise and bold in my communications to pilot when I say there is an aircraft at 3 o'clock closing, same altitude or whatever it is, And I had one of our pilots was great when I was new too, about on our dead legs. He'd be like, all right, you see that mountain over there? How far do you think it is? So for those of us who have mountains, that's nice, Blake, because it's easier for me to get good at distance, right? Because I'd be like, okay, I think it's 8 miles. And he's like, well, it's actually 5, so that kind of thing was super helpful. If you're a new person, I highly recommend playing that game when you're up front, the distance game. Yeah. Because that perception is hard.
Totally different, especially when everything is flat.
Yes.
Yes. I'm really bad at guessing the miles on that. And I'm like, I don't know. And then they were like, well, they're like, one field. And I was like, do you see all the fences? What designates one field as a mile? I'm like, I don't know what any of that is.
Exactly.
I can't tell because it's so flat and it goes on,
Yeah. So in your area, it's a good game to play, right? On your terrain or lack of terrain, because and because I didn't know that objects that are taller appear closer, so things like that for us with our mountains, the mountains seem closer than they are because they're tall. Right. And so
like that, you need like one of those signs on the window, like your
car are closer than they appear. Right. And so those kind of games, that you're playing are actually increasing your safety at the end of the day too. And
absolutely.
That takeaway of just being able to have open discussions with your pilot about like, what does that mean? And why are we doing that? And not them, they don't get defensive because they're like, what do you mean? Why am I doing that? It's like, no, I want to understand why we're doing this, but just, the takeaway for us has just been, it's increasing our chances. And that's all that any of us can hope for. The stars can align poorly and things may not matter what we've prepared for, right? And we all know that's a possibility. But at the end of the day, I will go down fighting if I have the option to, right? So anything I can do, whether that's the incapacitated pilot stuff, survival, heat, anything I can do to be able to look my family in the face every day when I go to work and say, I'm going to be careful. Because that's what I mean when they say be careful and I say, I will.
Be safe. Everybody fly safe on your.
Yeah, what does that mean? What are we doing to okay, cool, I will. And then I go and I do nothing for 24 hours, other than watch shows. Sometimes we all have those days, but overall, if there are things I can be doing to actually look my family in the eye and say, yes, I will try my best to be safe, then those are the things I can do. to mitigate those risks that I know about.
Well, we really appreciate you joining us on the podcast today and having this discussion. I think it's something that it is so incredibly important. And I am so grateful that you and your teams are making a difference every single day by pushing this training out internally, externally, and getting that message across. So thank you to you, Chelsea, and to your team. This has been an amazing discussion, and we really appreciate you coming on and joining us.
I appreciate you guys having me and getting the word out there, helping us, spread the word as much as we can. So thank you.
Well, and as we mentioned before, you guys will be at the Echo Philly conference. So if anybody is coming to Echo Philly and wants to connect with Chelsea there, be able to talk a little bit more about the HEAT program and or incapacitated pilot program that Carilion is doing. There will be some amazing folks there. So come and meet them and get to know them a little bit better and talk about what these programs could mean for your program back home. So,
yeah, we're going to be doing a little bit of a combined workshop this year. You don't want to miss it. So
awesome. Sounds amazing. Well, thank you again. We really appreciate it. This has been a phenomenal discussion. A huge thank you to our listeners as well for the continued support of the Vertical Hellcast platform and the Valor Flight Crew podcast. If you guys are all caught up on the Valor Flight Crew podcast, make sure you head on over to verticalhellcast.com where you can check out the Hangar Z podcast, Helicopter podcast, Vertical MRO podcast. You guys have a great one. We'll see you next time. Be safe, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Valor Flight Crew podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message from our sponsors.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support. Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, save lives, and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
As we bring this episode in for a landing, we want to thank Chelsea for sharing the work being done through Carilion Life-Guard's HEAT program, and for the reminder that strong safety cultures are built long before an emergency ever happens. Programs like this highlight what makes the public safety aviation community so strong: training together, learning from one another, and constantly looking for ways to be better prepared for the moments that matter most. Whether it's aviation crews, fire departments, EMS providers, or industry partners, it's that collaboration and commitment to improvement that ultimately protects the people behind the mission. If today's conversation sparked ideas for your own program, we encourage you to keep the dialogue going. Share the knowledge, build the relationships, and keep pushing the standard of safety forward. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Valor Flight Crew podcast. Be safe, everyone, and we'll see you again next week with more amazing stories that are shaping the future of public safety aviation.